Hello, good evening, good morning, good night, and welcome to Neuma's very first Launchpad, hence Launchpad number one. And we are very lucky to have 4 albums going live today, May the 16th, 2025. And we've got that cohort of incredible artistic talent right here on Zoom today, having this kind of poly CD launch party for the new era. So this is Philip Blackburn. I am, well, Neuma Records, I guess, and coming to you live from the Neuma office in windy, cold, chilly St. Paul, Minnesota. And one by one, we're going to hear from these artists, and then we'll have them answer questions to and from each other. We'll listen to some music and hopefully get a better idea of what it's all about concerning their new album. So, without further ado, if you're online now, I think you're already muted, which is great to save bandwidth. Bandwidth is precious. And Jeannine Wagar is our very first composer, and she has an album called Into the Night. Jeannine, take it away.
Okay, how's my audio?
Your audio is terrific.
Okay, great. Well, my story may be a little different than the rest of you. I started composing later in life because I had a whole lifetime of performance. I started out as a pipe organist and then shifted to conducting and had a 30-year career. And then sort of wanted to get off the page, wanted to stop just reading notes, and studied jazz for about 10 years. And that was really fun. And that really did a lot, I think, for me. And then started playing around with analog synthesizers with a friend of mine. And we got a few commissions, unbelievably enough. And that was for a few years. And then I decided, okay, I'm not a composer. I'm not known as a composer. No one's going to commission me. I don't have enough money to hire a bunch of musicians for all the sounds that I hear in my head. So I'm going to play and try having a lot of fun with some plugins. And so I started experimenting and realized that with unbelievable amounts of effort that I could get the plugins to sound fairly authentic. And so I started making this album. I sent Philip a track, and he goes, okay, with a lot of mastering, maybe this will work. And then I kept at it. And so I now have my first album, and I'm thrilled about it. And who knows, it could lead to a commission maybe sometime. But in the meantime, I can play with electronics, and I love electronic sound. And so we can just start. I used a set of plugins from Spitfire Audio and Earcom, of course, from the great Pierre Boulez. And most of my percussion sounds are taken from loops that Earcom did from inside the piano techniques. So we're all very familiar with those. But I was able to loop a lot of these effects in a way that you probably couldn't do in a live performance. And so the other thing about this album was it was sort of like a psychological journey for me, because I've sort of been just very introverted in the last few years. And so I called it Into the Night. And you can have your own story that goes along with this. But my story was I just decided to go down deep into my unconscious and look and see what was there, and then hit a big period of my life that was pretty difficult, and then spin out of it. So maybe we can start with the plunge into the unconscious, and you don't have to go there. You can go anywhere you want. So Into the Night, and it starts out with the percussion from the Earcom inside the piano. I can talk a little bit over this. And what I was trying to do here was get some string sound. So if this were ever commissioned, or I could do it, I could use the electronic percussion track and then have a string orchestra. And what I was able to do with the crescendos and the diminuendos is I became pretty good at faders. And so you can just fade it in. And as an orchestra conductor, it was really kind of fun. And I was actually able to change bowings. They have developed the plugins to a certain extent. And I was also able to use a lot of extended techniques that they have recorded. And so it actually could be done live if that ever happened. But so that was my sort of my zeitgeist or whatever of playing with the plugins. Then the next piece, this is sort of deep into it, and I called it I Cry Too. And I used some earcom plugins that if it were played live, it would be crystal glasses that would be bowed and of course mic'd, and then there would be a string orchestra underneath that. And maybe we can hear a little bit of I Cry Too. And this is sort of like the meat of the CD. So here are the crystal glasses. Okay, I know we don't have time, so it ends with the crystal glasses. And it was just fun for me to be able to, add sort of expression to what I was sort of imagining in my mind as conducting a string orchestra. So you conduct it with faders. And then as we come sort of out, how much time do we have, Philip? I don't want to take up too much time here.
You've got 2 or 3 more minutes. Enjoy yourself.
Boy, okay.
There's still a puddle on the floor to wipe up.
Okay.
All that crying.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
about a bit of of that choir coming in? Is that in the next track? That's tragic.
Oh, I have a lot of tragedy. Yeah, we can, let's see. Yeah, motion. That's the last track, and that was probably the most difficult. And what I learned about doing these, and especially working with the sound engineer, Erdem, and I can't pronounce his last name, so you pronounce it with for me, Philip.
Erdem Helvacoglu
Thank you.
in my best Turkish.
Yes, well, it was really fun working with him. And as we were working together, this is the track that had the most lanes. And that's really difficult when you're using plugins because I was trying to get plugins that matched each other and balancing it all out. Where I usually would use my hands as an orchestra conductor, you're having to do it digitally, which is a tricky thing. But he did a great job, and in the future I won't use as many lanes, I don't think. But this has tape piano, and then it has a choir coming in, so and some wind effects.
And if you want to know how it ends, it's
Yes,
available from all good download stores.
didn't quite get to the choir, and that's just fine. Onward and upwards.
Yeah, we've teased them enough. If you want to hear the choir, you know where to find it. Thank you, Jeannine. Shall we move on then? We'll come back to you and everybody else in turn for conversation. All right. So moving right along, I think it's Anna Rubin next. Is that right?
Yes.
Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Philip. And thank you so much for setting this up. I've put together a double CD with pieces that I've done roughly between 2015 and 2023. And the title of the album is Powehi. And that's for a long piece for two pianos and actor. I was commissioned by the Piano on the Rocks Festival, which takes place every year in Sedona. I've been collaborating with the director, who's also a wonderful pianist, Sandrine Erdelisayo. I've been collaborating with her now for several years. And we both were kind of obsessed with black holes. And I think we all at some point a few years ago, we saw this photograph, the first black hole that had ever been photographed is named Powehi. The honor of naming it was given to this wonderful man, a Hawaiian linguist, who came up with the name. It's based on Hawaiian wisdom tradition, and it means something like the dark center of an ending creation, or the dark center of embellished creation. It's apparently a very complex notion, but I was so taken with that I decided that had to be the name. And the piece is in several sections. I won't talk too much about it, but it is. And I wrote a part for actor, and it's spoken by Pamela Fields, wonderful actor who I've known for many years. And Sandrine is on one piano, and the second pianist is Cynthia Rain. And they have played together for many years, and their listening to each other is really amazing. So I have a very short excerpt to give you a flavor of it. And this is towards the end of the piece.
We ache for both darkness and light. Where light exists, it is pure, blazing, fierce. But light exists almost nowhere in the universe. And the blackness itself is also pure and blazing and fierce.
And that quote is the one quote I used, and it's from Carl Sagan, one of my culture heroes. So that piece premiered a couple of years ago in Sedona, and it was quite a project to record it because the players were all over the place. And the night we recorded, we were in Maryland, and there was an intense and very unique thunderstorm that actually cut off power briefly. So it was a very dramatic recording session. The next piece I'd like to play is called Everything Goes B. Before I got obsessed with black holes, I was obsessed with bees. And I'd been hearing about colony collapse disorder, this terrible malady that was killing literally millions of bees, a very complex, multifaceted condition. Everything from the mechanization of modern bee culture, the way bees are trucked around from farm to farm, the reduction of their food sources, and then terrible infestations. I came across a wonderful poet named Dee Brandt, a Canadian poet, and she wrote a poem called And Everything Suddenly Goes B. And I took excerpts from this poem, and this piece is sung. It's for soprano, violin, and electronics. And the poem is at times just wonderfully whimsical and celebratory. And then it gets into this sadder imagery around the terrible things that are happening to bees, and then ends in a very loving way and in kind of a benediction for the bees. So I'm very grateful that Dee let me use her poem. And the people performing are Aidi Yoshioka on violin and Susan Botti, soprano. Together they form a group called Duo della Luna, and they have a very unique repertoire. So why don't you play that, Philip? And for the last piece, this is purely electronic. Much of the CD has either spoken narrative, sung narrative, or speech that's been heavily processed in electronics. I love the spoken word as much or more than I love the singing voice. And to me, it's such a wonderful source of power, and you learn and you know so much about someone from their voice. So much is conveyed. And so the poem I used is by a wonderful Chicago poet named Rebecca Morgan Frank, whom I met when I was in residence at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. And she gave a reading one night, and I was so taken with this poem. And her poem is called Monk Automaton. And she starts with the notion, her husband is a historian, I believe a medieval historian. He was working with this sculpture that's in the Smithsonian. And it's the first known mechanical sculpture. It's a monk that was made by a clockmaker. So you apparently wind it up, and the monk prays and has a little rosary in its hands. And so she takes this and she ties it to the idea of robots in a really incredibly creative way. And so the poem it turns humorous, ironic, angry, and in the end, kind of a lament, a loss of our religious perspective on life. And so I have a friend who has a wonderful kind of deep speaking voice, and I recorded her reciting along with some other people. And you can play this excerpt and you'll get an idea of some of the ways I play with the spoken word and other kinds of sounds that I used.
Robots can do almost anything you please. Sexual favors. They are up on sexual favors.
So there's a little teaser. And you hear some of the humor. And so she does eventually get around to the monk and the statue and even undocumented workers loading boxes for Costco. And the poem is just brilliant. And it was a lot of fun and very challenging to try to realize it in this way. So that gives you kind of a little taste sampler.
Thank you, Anna. It makes me realize that we use this word CDs, but some of our younger viewers may not recognize what this thing is and how much information it contains and what beautiful thoughts go into such things. Of course, you can download the streams and everything else too, but that's what a CD used to look like. And we'll come back to you in a while, but why don't we move on to Jeffrey? Jeffrey Schanzer, are you there?
I am. I'm Jeffrey Schanzer and not Bernadette Speech. She's my wife and the Minister of Communications here at this house, so I'm using her laptop. My piece is entitled The Past is Present, It's a cantata about and by Holocaust survivors and their children. One of them was me. As I said in my liner notes, before my father's death in 1992, I had never really dealt with my heritage as a child of survivors in my music. And first thing I wrote was a piece for violin and orchestra in memory of my father entitled Totenmarsch. He survived the death march from the Nazi concentration camp at Buchenwald. The next piece I wrote was Lament for Eric, which turned out to be the first movement of this, although I didn't know that at the time. It was about my feelings for my half-brother Eric, who survived the Holocaust, but died of leukemia 3 years before I was born. And really, kind of the only thing I knew of my father's life, since he didn't talk much, was he had a picture of Eric in his bedroom. So that was for viola and baritone. I remembered for my bar mitzvah, I had to learn the tropes to read from the Torah and Haftorah for my bar mitzvah. And I kind of used that idea of mingling tropes in that piece. And that's the first movement. And then I decided I really wanted to deal with my mother's family as well. And I went and took a tape recorder and asked her to describe her flight from the Nazi blitzkrieg of Poland in 1939 and the aftermath. And the second movement of this is that piece, A Mother's Story, 1939 to 40. And the wonderful Isabelle Ganz, who has just joined us, performed it in 1997, and I'm so fortunate that she's still around and is on the CD to do the mothers. And my brother has a hard time listening and may not watch the video because she actually takes on my mother's persona. It's truly amazing. I had to do a few edits. Luckily, I'm a guitarist myself, so luckily, guitar players don't have to worry about, losing range as they get older. But I made some edits for Isabelle, and she did a truly amazing job. So let's play that, Philip. That's the first cue. This is the first couple minutes of the mother's story. Oh, and Mary Wooten is the cellist on this. This is taken from the live stream at Roulette.
Mom, what happened when the war started?
Well, of course we knew that the war is coming. On August 31st, we had to try on our gas masks. But there was no gas. There was a blitzkrieg. On September 1st, I got up and looked out from the bedroom window, and there was in the sky a formation of German planes. Friday, the war broke out. Friday, September 1st. On Sunday, September 3rd, I left my home for a
Okay, that's enough.
Jeffrey, I also have the libretto with the images from the show. We could come back to show some of those if you like.
Certainly, if people would like to see them. The images are taken from old family photographs, which survived the Holocaust, as well as original artwork by my friend Noah Bogan, who is also the son of survivors. After that piece was performed in 1997, I felt like compelled to tell my family's story in a much more uh, complete way, and the result is the past is present, which is 8 movements. Um, one of the kind of difficulties was that I was working with oral testimony. So I thought perhaps I could find a poet or a writer who would be able to, go over that and maybe do some edits and make it more like a libretto that a opera composer or whatever would be able to use. And that didn't happen. So I just continued. I took my tape recorder again and asked my mother about her um, experiences after the war. I took my tape recorder to my father's niece, Rita Scharf, who described the Schanzer family uh, zeitgeist or whatever before the war, as I didn't want to just make a piece that was entirely about gloom and doom, which is pretty hard to deal with. I mean, this is hard enough as it is. So, and that is there are 2 movements with her, first describing the Schanzer family before the war, and then her immediate family's uh, experience under Nazi control. And then there's my mother's, and I also had my tape recorder, and my brother and I sat down and talked about our experience as children of survivors. And 2 movements are dealing with that, not just 2, but the third movement. And, my parents were great lovers of the European art music tradition. I was fortunate, like they sent me to the Buffalo Philharmonic when I was in grade school and high school. Lucas Foss was the conductor at first. I saw an incredible amount of great new music. Then there was a real step down with Michael Tilson Thomas. And Bernadette, my wife, does sometimes cuss me out for having seen people like Yehudi Menuhin and all the great pianists and violinists, but I was fortunate. But the problem is that as children of survivors, and this isn't just, a Jewish thing, any children of immigrants has to kind of navigate the difference between the culture of their parents and the culture they're growing up in. So the third movement is kind of has a rock and roll kind of thing. And then the seventh movement is more what in my own experience became more, I don't know what the best word is, uh, more adult or more, yeah, look, this word search shit is really tough. Um, but is more of a jazz thing. So and then the final movement is about my father's passing, which the different characters have something to say about. How much time do I have, Philip?
3 or 4 more minutes.
Okay, well then let's play the seventh movement. Um, the wonderful pianist Nuri Tillis was at the original production at the Kitchen, and she told me that this was going to be the hit single for the album. So it starts at 1 hour, 7 minutes and 30 seconds, Philip.
just not possible. You can't make up for the Holocaust. It's just not possible. Mom, I felt I couldn't do enough. She wanted me to take care of her emotionally. I felt she wanted me to replace what she never had with Dad, emotional intimacy. I always felt we were to make up for those who didn't live. The Holocaust, it's just not possible. You can't make up for the Holocaust, it's just not possible. You can't make up for the Holocaust, it's not possible, but we try. Possible, but we try. It's not possible, but we try. I wonder what effect this will have on my daughter.
Okay.
Thank you. While I've got the screen up, shall I just flick through a few of the images that
Sure.
were part of this project?
That's my half brother Eric, my father. That's the picture of Eric that was in my father's bedroom. This is a little bit happier of a movement. This not. That's my half sister, Vera, who did not survive. It's my parents. That's me.
And on that note, thank you, Jeffrey. We can come back a little bit later if you like.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
All right, David. How many Davids do we have available from Lawson?
Looks like it's just me.
Well,
But
you
before we
fill
talk
great
about-
shoes. Go ahead.
before we talk about me, I just want to circle back to Jeffrey and say I also had a father who had a very, very difficult time expressing certain parts of his life. He grew up in Mississippi, born in 1925. Could not get my dad to talk about his life in Mississippi at all. It's just like, it didn't exist. So I can really appreciate that. Your father's men of that certain kind of generation. Just sort of took me back a bit. So thank you for that. So anyway, I'm David Margolin Lawson. I'm half of a writing team called Lawson and Merrill. And my partner David is somewhere on an airport run, picking up a friend of his right now. David and I are recording engineers. We're theatrical sound designers, composers, and we met a few years ago. Found out we had many of the same interests, and we kind of started sharing each other's work, and started to kind of, work on a few pieces together, and it formed a nice little writing partnership. David's a great collaborator. I tend to start things, and David finishes them for me, and I really enjoy our collaborations. We've released our second album together today, and it's called Analogues, and I'm going to play a couple of pieces from it. My writing style is sort of infused or informed from theater. My main gig in life is as a theatrical sound designer and recording engineer. Composing is something that kind of came out of teenage interest in both theater and electronic music. And it was when I started working professionally in the theater and became a sound designer that I figured out how I could kind of combine these two interests. So electronics plays a very large part in my theater work. This first piece is an example of some of my theater work. It started out as a piece from a play. And then when Mr. Merrill and I began working together, we expanded on the ideas, fleshed it out more, and made a much larger story of it. And this is the first piece on the album, and it is called An Arabian Twilight. And this is the intro. Probably a good place for that. So our pieces tend to well, actually, this piece does have a very nice build to it, as gets to a very dramatic place, which is atypical for us. Other pieces on the album are much longer, and they tend to sort of create an atmosphere. And we try to see how long we can exist within this atmosphere before moving on to the next piece. So a lot of our work is about sustaining things, building and sustaining. This album starts out looking at things from the vantage point of about maybe 20,000 feet above. And then we kind of get to ground level with things. And then we go very much inside, almost on a molecular basis, before we explode things out again to the very ending. This next piece is the end. It's the last track on the album, and it is called Waters of the Moon. You can let this play while I talk over. But this is a very nice example of some of it. It's very good at building frames around the pictures, as well as arranging the pictures and filling in details as we go along. So it was a very, very nice little intro to the main piece. I like to end things in a very calm, sort of relaxing manner. Nice ways to sign off. Like that a bit more and ends.
Hey guys, I don't know if you can hear me, but I just was able to join this meeting.
David! Here you are.
Yay.
So if you say David, now you'll get two.
I was saying such nice things about you too.
I heard that. I got to talk to you later. Anyway, I'm so glad I was able to chime in on this at the last second. Just want to say hi. I've enjoyed everybody's music. I've had a chance to listen to some of it. Thank Philip, as always, as I'm sure we all are grateful for him, for doing stuff and thinking out of the box, and quite an eclectic label, if just by judging the, all our records are all so different from one another. God bless you, Philip.
Oh, well, thank you. Just when you appeared here, I thought Deus Ex Machina has arrived, and you're out of the clouds, out of the airport, and here you are. Well, yeah. So thank you for that. And actually, that maybe is a nice little segue to like opening the floor for discussion amongst you and everybody. Similarities, differences. If you have questions, comments for each other. I think you're all amazing, but
that's what we say about you. I know you are, but what about?
oh, what a love fest.
I'd like to give a shout out to Momiliani Ramstrum, who's here. She and I worked on one of the pieces that's on the CD that's called If I Could Sing Like a Bird.
Yeah.
Thank you, Momiliani.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I really enjoyed working with Yana. And I really enjoyed listening to all the diversity of sounds and approaches. This is quite beautiful. And yeah, I'm grateful to be included in your work, Anna. And it's so unfortunate that all we get are these tiny little snips of all these pieces because they're all so intriguing. They really invite you in for further listening.
Hey, that's not a problem. That's why we have a label. We can fix that.
And they're all streaming, available on streaming today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can listen away.
Oh, wonderful. That's beautiful.
I'm curious how
Can you
go
put a
ahead.
link in the chat to where we could download or stream?
Yeah, why don't you just go to neumarecords.org and
Okay.
click on the front page. You'll find your favorite artists and albums right there. Each one of you will be directed to Bandcamp, to the Neuma site itself, or to any of your favorite streaming services that I hesitate to promote since they kind of contribute to the glut of everything. But if you have a favorite streaming service, you'll find it. Don't worry. And 3 of these 4 are available on CD. That's this thing here. And they're all available in digital zeros and ones in various ways. I'm curious how some of you treat time. Time in your music, time as a thing.
You know
We've
what?
gone from like abstract to dramatic. There are different. None of this is really clock time as far as I can hear, and you all manage it so beautifully.
You know, it's a funny thing that you say that. The first teacher, my first exposure to synthesizers and what was then called electronic music was with a composer named Eli Tannenbaum at Manhattan School of Music. And after we learned some of the instrument, a large ARP 2500, we started getting into composition. And he said, keep in mind, time exactly is something you can think about, particularly in this abstracty sort of medium, because you could sit there, with a module going, and for like 10, 20 minutes, like, yeah, this is so cool. And then realize you've said nothing. So that was a really challenging and something aspect to keep in mind, as opposed to when you're writing bars of music. I think it's a different sort of discipline in a way. I don't know how you feel, but interesting that you raised that issue, though, Philip. Yeah,
it's interesting because we don't necessarily write bars of music.
Oh,
so we're not counting time in our pieces. They just sort of they develop.
Well, I can relate to that, obviously, with my music. I think I was really, really motivated by time, or it really touched me from my experience in Mexico. I lived in Mexico City for about maybe 10 years and got to know a lot of the composers there. And it was an intense period of my life where I was actually conducting in Mexico City, which was wonderful. But the composers were all very, very, very involved in trying to, compose like their ancestors and the Mayans and the Aztecs and try to capture that feeling. But one of the main things was time. And when I'm in Mexico, there is no time. It's not a linear time. It just flows. And so when we were talking about this non-linear time with the composers, and they said they were trying to get that. And one of the composers you may have heard of was Mario Lavista of Mexico City. And a lot of his work was around that, just catching that non-linear sense of living. And you're living in a world of magical realism. And I think maybe electronic music or the music that we heard today that's not electronic, it's a very, very good vehicle for that kind of experience. So, and Anna, your music does the same thing, and so does Jeffrey in a way, just like Philip was saying. It suspends time, which I think is just an incredible way to look at things.
Well, and that brings in the aspect of language and text, because Anna and Jeffrey are both dealing directly with, intelligible language, telling a story and a narrative, and it comes with a certain kind of structure, but you've both managed to kind of get in there under the hood and kind of rework that, give it a narrative arc as well as kind of an abstract sonic one too. And that also maybe relates to collaboration. So obviously we've got the two Davids that together make up one mega David, and how you suspend your egos and say, okay, just run with it.
You know, ego, that is something I think about a lot because David and I, we both have very, very, very strong personalities. But the one thing I've so enjoyed about our collaboration is putting my ego aside and listening to another idea. It's like, for instance, music that I write solo, I never listened to because, I know what informs it. I know all the decision making that went into it. There's no mystery to it. But I love listening to the stuff David and I do together because there's a lot of mystery to it, and that's because I don't supply everything. And I really enjoy that aspect. And
That's really fascinating because I'm kind of experiencing the same thing with Anna, that I'm more inclined to listen to the works because it surprises me in
Yeah.
ways that my own pieces, oh yeah, I know what that's all about.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, but also back to what you're saying about the timelessness, Jeannine, about our music, that when we're writing, we have a different perception of time, and that it's like a Tarkovsky film. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced that, where your sense of time has to change for you to enjoy a Tarkovsky film. Because he has such long, extended experiences, and to allow yourself be drawn in that way as a listener or a viewer is something that's very much a part of the music I'm hearing today. And that's a beautiful thing that changes us. It becomes almost a ceremony to enter into the world. So yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's why none of you are going to make the top 40, because we have to enter your world and become immersed in how things work in your mind. Whereas I think commercial music does exactly the opposite. Like, how can we invade your mind in the quickest way? And
Yeah, in terms of collaboration, I like to get away from being the composer. I work with my wife, Bernadette Speech. We have an improvisational duo. And for me, what emerges from, we both have very different compositional backgrounds, although we both studied with Morton Feldman. But improvising together, we create something that neither of us could do on our own in our own compositions. And in a couple of comments on time, the mother's story is almost 19 minutes long. I wanted to try to cut it. I could. When it was premiered at the Kitchen in '97 and Isabelle sang it, you could hear a pin drop. And I said, well, I guess I made the length work. Then again, Morton Feldman, wrote 5-hour string quartets. So I didn't quite go there, but yeah, time is a difficult thing to think of when you're writing. I guess when you're playing, it's much more, at least it feels much more immediate to me.
I'd like to add a slightly different twist on that. When I feel like I'm working with recorded speech, it feels like a collaboration. I have to kind of submit to that sound material and try to find the magic in it. There's something given there. And so it's kind of an interesting process.
Yeah, when you are working with words, the words themselves give you the rhythms, give you the ideas. If you're listening, I've heard plenty of stuff, music with words that makes no sense, and maybe the composers weren't actually listening to what the words were saying, but
I guess in a way you have to submit yourself to a piano, or you have to submit yourself to a violin.
Yeah.
You know, any sound material you use, you have to kind of bow at the altar of that sound.
I'd like to say something about the words because I listened to Jeffrey's mom's testimony over and over and over because I wanted to get her inflection. I wanted to get her Polish Yiddish accent as close as possible, but still be comprehensible. So it was a really a listening experience. And the other thing I would like to say is that as a composer, which I also do, the problem with time is what befuddles me because I'm a dinosaur. I put notes down with pencil, and it takes so long to put them on paper, but then it flies by in performance. So you have to really change your concept of time.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Jeannine, from listening to her work with electronics, do you notate ahead of time, or does the tone or the texture of the sound material you're working with, does that suggest the notation for you?
Well, what I did was I would start out on my acoustic piano, okay, and sketch out, some harmonic progressions, and just from my few years in jazz, I mean that helped, and just different kinds of movement where you're going to go instead of some normal ways of moving, and so I would sketch out something, and then I would go up to my studio and start playing around, of course, with the sounds like you guys do, and the sound suddenly takes you somewhere else. But my sketch was sort of a guiding post. And so I just didn't get lost in it. And so there was always a point of where I was going, like you do. Your music it evolves and grows. And so do you use a sketch, or do you just go with it? Because I have had the experience of working with another composer, Ryan Cockerham, and he's a synth guy and also a violinist, but we used to collaborate like you did. And we would just, we would just play around with our synthesizers for like 4 hours and do nothing except that. And then you'd get maybe 10 minutes of something that was really cool. So, yeah. And so what do you guys do? I'm really interested.
With me, usually a sound will suggest
yes
wants to go.
Yes.
I'll kind of let it lead and I'll follow, and
then the textures come.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's very this process is very improvisatory in a way.
Yeah.
With David, our collaboration has really been more, he starts it and then he tolerates my imitating it, so to speak. But, you start with the sound. It's funny you say that you'll like 10, 20 minutes of something. That'll happen too, like on Points on a Line is my favorite piece off of our record. And, I'll come up with some sound that like feels like it works, and I'll print like it through the whole piece, only to end up using like 10 seconds of it here or there or whatever. But it's a react, sound is what we all react to, and it's just how we organize it, so to speak, whether it's notated, or whatever, you know what I mean? It's
I have
process.
And Jeannine, I just want to express my admiration for your patience with these plugins, because to get the sound that you want from the technology is no small thing. And the level of tedium that is required to do that is enormous. And I started to go in that direction, and I just felt, I really don't feel like it. So my hat is off to you, Jeannine. Really beautiful results with so much detail that I know is required.
Really good detail and good depth. Your music has a real 3D quality about it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've been really working at it for a long time, and it's just so, you really have to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it to get it to live. And the difference with plugins versus the analog synthesizer, so you have that richness right there immediately, and you can do what you're saying. You just add this little thing. But with plugins, because I really wanted to get an instrumental sound too, and as focused as I could. But it's about it. You're right. It's about tedium, faders. Faders, compressors. Oh my God! Oh,
Lots of layering.
Reverb.
Lots of layering.
Lots of layering. Lots and lots of layering.
I have to say that I really very much enjoyed the sound. I much prefer the sound of analog synthesizers to the new stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, Keith Emerson's solo on Lucky Man is, one of the great Moog sounds ever. Pete Johnson's use of the ARP synthesizer on Won't Get Fooled Again, all that. Maybe I'm just an old fart rock and roller, but all that stuff is really, to me, the shit.
Fabulous.
They say, as the young people say today.
Or Don Buchla. Do you remember him?
I was just going to say, throw in Morton Subotnick, who was a Buchla user. Don Buchla.
Yeah, they were my buddies back in the day. So.
Oh, fabulous! Really fabulous. Yeah. And when it comes to Subotnick, especially some of the later stuff, my favorite piece of his is the Four Butterflies. I know everybody knows, Silver Apples of the Moon, which was sort of this breakthrough piece. But from a recording point of view, he was limited to, I don't know, maybe 4 tracks at the most. And when you think about the kind of control and detail and nuance and subtleties that he was able to achieve with that limited, I don't know. It's great stuff. But I'm with you, the old guys. I love Keith Emerson, God.
And also the nature of improvisation in this kind of work is so much a part of my practice. And the idea that you spend 20 hours or 20 minutes and then you get this little nugget that you recognize, but then you have to somehow log or document your 20 hours or 20 minutes to be able to find those nuggets. It requires a lot of listening and a lot of freedom, of lack of restraint, so that when you are in that improvisatory state, you are able to enter in the timelessness of it. And then you do find these moments of pure gold that are beautiful.
Thank you for that beautiful wrap-up. And David Merrill, if I can just put a small footnote to what you just mentioned about Silver Apples, of course, it relates to Golden Oranges of Mars, perhaps? Another Neuma release that you will need to check out because it features that solo David in his own right, unmolested by any collaborations, I think. No interference.
Yeah, no interference. The other curious thing I just want to throw in too, especially when you're dealing more with this abstract sonic sculpture painting is really what I call this medium now, is, when do you know you're done? When do you know what people have done? And the other thing I would like to add too about the, the improvisatory and the, sort of slaving away is if it's inspiring you, if you're inspired, you'll sit there and slave away. It's not slavery. You know what I mean? It's like, it's motivation because you're inspired by it. If that makes any sense, I don't know.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. You're lost.
Yeah.
Lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're living on that edge.
Philip, thank you for this. This is great.
So wonderful. Thank you so much, Philip.
Can I just, I'm not really a musician. I'm here because Isabelle was so gracious to invite me. I'm really very peripheral to this. I saw Leah Stoller that I also know, and Anna Rubin. I think I met you at Sandrine's, one of Sandrine's festivals up there in Sedona. But so the name Morton Subotnick kind of brings up a memory for me. Did anybody of you come across, I think it was one of his colleagues at that San Francisco tape something or
Festival?
other? And the name I'm thinking of is a man called Ramon Sender Barayon. Yeah? Y'all know the name?
Yeah.
You're familiar with the name?
Pauline Oliveros and
Yes, Pauline
yeah.
Oliveros.
Pauline
and
Oliveros,
Ramon
yes,
Sender,
Pauline, yes,
Morton
I've heard her in the
Subotnick.
past.
Yeah, Ramon Sender. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, you so this is just like a tiny side note. So I talked to him a couple of years ago because it turns out that his aunt, well, actually, he's the son of an extremely famous, well-respected left-wing Spanish writer that had to leave right before or at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War, Ramon José Sender. And so there's a long story. I don't know if you ever came across that story or he ever said it, but his dad came to the States and then became a professor of Spanish literature and Spanish language, and was somewhat removed from Spain and the cultural life throughout the Civil War, of course, and even afterwards the Franco era and so forth. Turns out that Ramon Sender Barayon's aunt, so his dad's sister was my teacher in school. It was very interesting because she was like a university level professor, but she was barred from teaching in any public school. And I was at a this tiny private school that nobody knew. And I mean, she found some employment there. And there was always this crazy talk about how she might have been incarcerated. I mean, we were little kids. And then when I came to the States, I found out that the famous writer, my teacher's brother, his son was really also so big in music. So it was so nice. And then I contacted him and told him about his aunt and my experience. She was a wonderful woman, fabulous teacher. We had basically a university level teacher in grade school, fourth grade.
Yeah.
Because she actually had been incarcerated for several years during the Civil War, and so she was obviously, she and her husband were totally barred from teaching. So we had this like university level teacher when we were 10 years old. This is amazing. But Ramon's, and then then I hear about this the electronic music, and he was in that space. So nice. Thank you for listening to my story. But I thought that might be a little side note.
Thank you. The past is always present, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lives with us. Yep.
And Maud is still around too, I'm happy to say. So I think on that note, we'll wrap it up for now, even though we could go on a lot longer, but maybe we'll come back with some more releases in the future. And I'm always honored and humbled to be amongst such people as you. And what fun I have with your sounds and your ideas. And thank you for letting me play with you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you for organizing this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful meeting all of you tonight.
great.
Great. Have a lovely weekend.
Take care, everybody.